lovelies. Housekeeping first, I suppose. The OGGM's post-apocalyptic goblins should go up for sale soon, possibly next week. Everything I backed or pre-ordered when I did have money seems to be coming in all at once, so we shouldn't be short of review fodder over the next period. Excuse me. Next weekend I'm away playing games with friends, so there won't be a video that weekend. And then the following week should be my birthday week, which I traditionally take off for the week, unless something particularly, a particularly aggressive bee gets in my bonnet, or I feel particularly inspired to do a topic of some kind. But when I stop posting, my channel memberships and followers tends to go up quite quickly. So who knows? Tonight is the first Tabletopless night that will be a Saturday. Yeah, we've been moving around a lot and trying to figure out the best way to proceed. But despite interruptions every couple of months, when I do get to visit my meat space friends, we should be regularly on the Saturday from now on. Pretty much almost directly. Excuse me. After T-shirts show. Hopefully this cough will have subsided by then. So yeah, YouTube's acting a bit weird. A lot of people who make political content, which I mostly don't, have been noticing it, but I've been noticing problems as well. Comments simply aren't appearing or are disappearing over time, despite not having anything problematic in them. They're not appearing in the held section, so I can't tell. And I doubt that many people are leaving egregious comments, and then there are plenty of egregious comments that get through, calling me names, hurling anti-Semitism at me despite me not being Jewish, all of these various things. And views seem to be down when this is typically the time of the year when views are up, ad revenue begins to climb, all of those sorts of things. It's not the time you want YouTube to have algorithmic or other hiccups. Maybe it's got something to do with the rolling out of this community update / rebrand. I don't know. Staying on social media for the moment. I am on Blue Sky, but it's pretty dead to me, despite all the people that claim to be joining up and the massive amount of followers some people seem to be getting. I think the problem for me is that it's just the inverse of what Twitter has become. So just equally horrible, just in a different direction. But if you really want to find me over there, you can find me at grimasaur.bsky.social. I know people are probably waiting for me to comment on Elon Musk's D&D comment. I don't know that I can be asked putting together a whole video on that. We've addressed it before at the time of the disclaimers and when the History of D&D book came out and all that. We've talked about it all before. It's nothing new. It's just, Elon has an enormous megaphone, and him joining in the chorus against the way in which the creators of D&D have been and are being slagged off and painted as racists and sexists and all the rest of it. I mean, Elon's an asshole, but in this singular occasion, he is right. It is a disgrace. It is an insult. It is a horrible thing. Many of these things, it's a real stretch to accuse Gary of these things, and it's hugely disrespectful to him and to his family. And his family and his friends and his co-workers from back in the day have been stepping up and strenuously refuting it, but in many people's eyes that just seems to cement them as more of the same kind of bad person. Of course, that Elon spoke up immediately polarized everybody, or at least everybody who seems to think in a sort of tribal fashion, I suppose, because Elon thinks the way the D&D creators have been slagged off is bad. Immediately, half of the population seems to have decided that, well, no, if Elon's against it, then they must have been bad and awful. And the other half of people are just overjoyed that their philosopher king has pointed out something to do with their hobby, and some are holding out hope that Elon could just buy D&D. I mean, provided they were willing to entertain an offer, I guess he could. But then I look at his other businesses and I think maybe he shouldn't. But yeah, I just don't. I don't think it helps or hinders. It just further polarizes an already polarized situation. And then there's people in the middle, like me, who are sympathetic to progressive ideas and causes, but not the methodologies and not what's been going on here. You know, I'm not a D&D guy, but I did torture a friendship and a business partnership over insults to his memory, and the use of his supposed bigotry to attack one of his sons, Ernie, who was involved with New TSR, which was a shit show. But even so, using someone's dead father and smearing someone's dead father as a bigot and a racist and all of this other stuff in order to attack their son just struck me as utterly low and disgusting behaviour, and that was beyond the pale for me. Gary had his flaws. Everyone has their flaws. I'm mostly flaw with a little cherry on top. But these accusations are slanted, cherry-picked from sarcastic comments, exaggeration for effect and other things, and the interpretation of the older work is done through such an utterly slanted and biased lens that I don't think it's at all reliable. The unnecessary disclaimers are insulting. The history book is insulting. All of it is insulting and unnecessary. And the mob that demands these things is never satisfied. But if you want to see a full-throated refutation, go and check out posts by Arneson and others of the old guard, and posts by his sons and daughters who have refuted what people are saying. That went longer than I thought it was going to. Alright, on the video, NPCs that shine. Rajun V says, the first 90 seconds of this sound like dude is sniffing his own farts and commenting on them like a sommelier. It's also pretty pessimistic to say that the market is saturated with shitty info and bad advice, but that's a great justification for never putting something out to publish. Sheesh, I'm playing in 90 minutes and I click through to see if there's any fun last-minute inspiration, and this video sucked the air out of the room. Anyway, comment for the algorithm? I'm not sure 90 seconds or more of me being self-deprecating and explaining why the advice I'm about to give is probably useless. I don't know if that counts as smelling your own farts or whatever, but people ask and they seem to think I'm good at these things, so I begrudgingly accept it, and then I'm immediately accused of being up myself. Well, that's kind of the point of the pretentious videos, is allowing myself to be up myself. Yeah, I think there was good advice in there despite all of that, and I do think the market is saturated with shitty info and bad advice. It's a whole successful genre on YouTube within the D&D community specifically. Bad advice by people who barely seem to play. So, I don't know. I don't think I'm being that... I don't think I'm bigging myself up. And I don't think I'm being pessimistic. I think I'm being realistic. And it would be a lot of work to put together a book of GM advice, which I wouldn't be especially confident on for all the reasons I laid out in the video. So it would be a lot of effort for little or no reward, I think. On the video about GMing, neatly enough, Hiding Sleeper says, people think you have to write a novel before you run a game. It's so dumb. At most, you need like 10 to 15 minutes beforehand. All you need for a story to evolve from the gameplay is NPCs with motives contrary to the players. Factions too. People overcomplicate everything these days. I will never understand the incessant prep. I've never done it, I never will. Why are you prepping that much? You're role-playing. It's literally all imagination fluff. Why do you want every detail mapped out? You don't need it. Your players don't need it. And if they do, this is not like anything you know. It will take considerable research, days in the library, studying. You can do that between sessions as downtime. It's not like everything has to be done and known from the start. Even then, in the example scenario I gave, you can improv that too. All of this to say, anyone can games master. It's not some esoteric endeavour of epic proportions. It's dice, it's pencils, it's paper. It's you and your players' imagination. I vaguely remember reading something about how people are finding it more and more difficult to just imagine and play make-believe. I think the thesis of the article was wrong in that they were blaming computer games and so on, so nobody engages in imaginative play anymore when they can just pick up a device and be immersed in a fantasy world, at least graphically and audibly. So I didn't agree with their conclusion, but apparently there is a noteworthy problem with that. And I think a lot of people feel a great deal of performance anxiety when it comes to being a GM. This is the Matt Mercer Critical Role effect. They feel that weight of expectation on them. People have talked a lot about that, and GMs put a lot of stress upon themselves. I do, and I've been doing this for decades. And yet I'm rarely ever satisfied with the way a session is done or my own performance at the table. That's not me begging for positive comments or anything. I'm just saying, I feel it, and yet I am somewhat confident I know what I'm doing. And yet I feel this dissatisfaction and this desire to do better, and I think that's what drives people. They want to create the best possible experience, and so they lean into the prep work and so on as a way of doing that. Another neat segue. Moving on to the review of the 2024 Dungeons Guide. Ugh, that's so unwieldy. Just call it 6th edition or 5.5. God damn it. Dr. Ewenders, or Drewenders, I'm not sure which, says, around 3 minutes 45, you mentioned people should come into role-playing games through other games. Which games would you choose? If Western Games Star Wars was still being produced, I would recommend that. I can't recommend any of the other iterations of it, and unfortunately the D6 systems that were not tied to intellectual properties don't ever seem to have had the reach that they should have, but as a throwback, that would be a good one. I think Dragonbane is positioned as an excellent introductory RPG. If you want to go back to the classics, I would say Dragon Warriors is definitely a good introductory RPG. A lot of overly simple games aren't necessarily great introductions, especially if they're narrative games, because they don't play like games, like computer games in a way that is familiar to people, or like board games in a way that's familiar to people, so they don't necessarily act as great introductions, unfortunately. I wish D&D would do not a starter set, which doesn't seem to really work or get traction in the right way, but I wish they would do something like Basic Expert, etc. I wish they would do something like that again, a stripped down, simplified version of the rules to help introduce people to role-playing, even though that would increase D&D's dominance. I think Redbox, etc. was the best introduction to role-playing that the market leader ever produced. Bruno Galan asks, you should review Troll Games' Castle Keeper's Guide. It's a much better GM book. I don't need any more T20 game books that I've already got coming. You know, variations on old school retro cloning, all of that. I just don't, unless something is exceptional. I will not be bothering with any more. Which isn't to say that, you know, if they sent me some of their material, I would be perfectly willing to review that, and that goes for anybody else as well. Mongoose Publishing didn't seem to regret it. Well, some of their writers did, but Mongoose Matt didn't. And I've had stuff sent to me from other publishers, and yeah, I'm always willing to have a look, but you're better off sending me physical product, because it sits there judging me until I review it. So, open option. Alright, so then the politics videos have been getting a little bit of quite a lot of interaction, but not a lot of usable interaction. But on the video about RFK, the Damned Time said, very cute, how about making a video about left-wing woo, like critical theory, gender ideology, cultural relativism, claiming to be sex positive, yet removing sexualized women from games, comics, etc. Are you willing to be consistent? Now, it says you've been subscribed to me for 2 years, which means you should have seen me talk about things like how critical theory isn't useful. I've talked about Sam Harris's moral landscape in respect to cultural relativism. You know, I'm sex positive. Shit, I'm playing a game with porn stars tonight. You know, so I have been consistent on all of those. The only thing I don't really see that you don't get there is gender ideology. Now, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by gender ideology, because I don't particularly see an ideology related to that. It may have been folded into some ideologies, but I don't really know what you mean by that. I support people's right to be themselves and to be treated humanely. That's as far as it really goes there. Anon Adalan says, funny how none of this was an issue, that's the anti-vax stuff and the rest of it, until he joined the other side, after he had a literal brain worm removed. It wasn't removed, it just died. And now lefties are going after raw milk, which is yet another attack on farmers. Farmers sell the milk. It gets pasteurized and then people can drink it. It's not really an attack on farmers. And removing fluoride from the water, which is either in large enough quantities to have negative effects or low enough quantities to have no effect at all of which is just as pseudoscientific as anything the right is spewing. No, diseases from unclean milk is not pseudoscientific. He did have a brain worm. The fluoride thing is paranoid nonsense. So that's not... I mean, and this has been an issue for a very long time. I remember Jeff Holiday doing videos about his anti-vax issues, going right back, and his conspiracy theory-addled brain. So it's just you haven't been paying attention to it, but now he's one of Trump's clown car appointments. Suddenly you're sensitized to it and you're picking up on the criticism, but the criticism has been there long before. You know, even before he caused all those deaths in Samoa and was it Tonga? I think it was Tonga. Not sure I care says, respectfully, everyone being a COVID skeptic in the US was from the government hiding the shot data. As far as I'm aware, they didn't, and there was international information available. The FTC is legally required to openly share this information for study, and they had to be sued under the Freedom of Information Act to get it. That doesn't sound too accurate to me. I guess it depends what data you're talking about. Or did we forget how fervently the WHO defended China as a possible most likely origin of COVID? Now, I think everyone agreed it was the most likely origin of COVID, but not that it was engineered in a lab or was deliberately released. That's what people were objecting to. Called Trump all the ists and phobes on every international newscast. Well, yeah, because he is. Only to point at China 2 or 3 years later. No, China was pointed to as the origin right from the start. The experts had their shot and kept using it for their own special interests. Nope. Better a fool to get it right some of the time than an intelligent con artist lying all the time. Well, now you've got a foolish con artist lying all the time, so how's that go? I mean, I wouldn't normally have bothered with that comment, but I think it brings up something important. Now that COVID is, well, it's not over, but now that the world treats it as being over, all the efforts to control and counter all the misinformation and conspiracy theories have stopped. And that is unfortunate because, as we can see from this commenter, the conspiracy theories and nonsense haven't stopped. Just trying to control them or counter them has stopped. And so they are breeding and becoming truths in people's minds, even though it's all nonsense. We should really be keeping up the effort to debunk the nonsense, but we're not, because it's exhausting, and crazy people, lunatics, and the angry have a lot more energy than calm, sane, rational people. It's one of those horrible flaws in humanity that would, if I was a religious man, I would blame God for poor design. But yeah. Now Sabot says, "Mate, you are in a silo. Most of this is BS. It's inaccurate and doesn't represent his positions. Just as an example, RFK2 is not anti-vax. He doesn't care if you want to vax. And yet." In July 2023, he told podcaster Lex Friedman that there's no vaccine that is safe and effective. If you couple that with his other comments saying that he's not against safe and effective vaccines, I think we see the problem. He talks out of both sides of his mouth all the time, contradicting himself. But we can look at the terrible effect that he had in Samoa, for example, and I think that tells us everything we need to know. This man should not be anywhere near the controls and levers of any health system whatsoever. Nor should Dr. Oz come to that, but that's for different reasons. On the Kalergi plan, there was a bunch of anti-Semitic abuse this week. That's mostly what it was. Telling me I wore a tiny hat or had a crooked nose, all of that kind of thing. But there is one comment that commonly comes up that I want to bring up here. James, as a fellow James, I hereby disown you, says, "When was the last time you took a walk in Bradford, Birmingham, or just any Western Central European city in general? It's happening in front of our very eyes." It's been a couple of years since I've been to Birmingham, but, I visited a poor neighbourhood. I've been to plenty of other places, Salisbury, Winchester, London. We've got friends all around the world. None of us see what you claim to be seeing. Just because you get a case of the vapours when you see a brown face or smell curry doesn't mean that the world is coming to an end or that anybody is being replaced. And that's really all this is. Zang. Of course you can call me Daddy, and if you want to follow me on Facebook, you can find me at james.desborough, Postmortem Studios, all one word, JD Writer, and JGD Games.
Murder me and fuck my skull. Put my body in a vat of acid. Put my brain into a jar. Show it to your friends. Bring my teeth to the dentist, but the dentist doesn't want them. So light them on fire and leave them on his car.